I want to preface this video by giving a shout out to Barty, who released Rotate Face, a new add-on for Blender 2.8 that allows you to rotate faces in an interesting way that kind of has that Fusion 360 feeling. I hope everyone just gives it a try. It's cheap and affordable, and also give him your bug reports. Secondly, I want to give a shout out to Power Save by Bongiorno, which recently has received an update to allow users to remove the end panel. Many people have reported recently that the end panel is something that gets in the way, especially when you have a lot of add-ons. And so we want to begin setting a standard for at least allowing users to customize, shorten, and remove the end panel if necessary in order to allow their workspace to remain fairly small. So if you're not using Power Save, definitely get in there and give it a try today. It's free. In a previous version of hardops, we introduced the KitOps Loader, which has now been improved to have better color management options for new and previous versions of Blender, but as an added bonus, whenever you click the top bar, we'll switch over to a decal machine version. So if you have decal machine installed on your system, you will be able to use it in order to load decal machine assets and scroll through your folders. The 10-pound scrolling issues have been fixed, and it should represent an entirely new way to deal with decal machine. I am personally a very large fan of decal machine, which is why whenever I press D, my decal machine pie menu shows up looking like this. And of course I can go under my preferences and add more rows. Which now it's actually something a little more suitable, as well as shrink them down. But for those using hardops, there is now the alternative of using the decal machine loader, which is just an alternative way, not intended to replace any other way, but just an alternative way of actually working with these asset loader systems and scrolling through these choices rather fast with a dynamically scalable window, of course. So I hope everyone enjoys what we have in store with this latest update. And without further ado, let's get into it. So here I am with a cube that I've cut up using Box Cutter, of course. I have a series of modifiers on it, and if I were to go under Mesh Tools in the Cube menu and access Dice, you would see that there's a series of modifiers that are live, and if I were to try to apply this dice and go into edit mode, you can see that it didn't actually take place on the object as desired. Another thing that's popular with Dice is actually dicing it and taking it under twist. So now if you were to go under Mesh Tools and Dice, you can actually press, in this case I'm going to press Q to change it to Mesh Intersect, but I'm also going to press T to turn on 2 twists as the in case for whenever we diced it. So whenever I click, you can see that I'm now inside of Twist 360 where I'm able to roll the wheel and actually dice unto twist. And this is something I'd wanted from the beginning of actually getting dice and twist in hardops, was to combine these because they seem like they would be quite a good combo. One of the other things I wanted to do was have it to dice unto lattice, but that's something we'll have to see about next time. We'll use B for box select, select everything, press Q, go under Mesh Tools and Dice. And after pressing Q to change our algorithm to be Mesh Intersect, we can press S in order to Smart Apply, which will allow us to click to apply our dice. And if we tap in edit mode, we can see that every object has had its modifiers applied and subsequently was diced. And that is something that's also new to this version. So in addition to being able to twist it, you can also just Smart Apply it in the middle of doing the dice process in order to ensure that your dice goes all the way through. I know, guys, I suck. It's terrible when I rename something that you've began getting used to, but now in the Alt-V menu, EVHQ or whatever I was calling it before has now been called Lookdev Plus. So if you go inside of it, it's basically the same thing. However, now it's been expanded to allow you to go through your environments. As you can see on the side, there's now a list of the environments showing that you can go through and see the list. You press X and go over to blur, of course, play with blur. But in addition to this, EVHQ has also been added under W. So you can press W and change from EVLQ to HQ. And if we right click, you can see that I'm able to stop the presentation of the EV Lookdev, or in this case, now it supports cycles as well. And I'll come out of full screen mode. And if we bring down the drop down here at the top under the TV icon, you can see that my LQ is set to something like 64, which we could jump up to 128. And we can set the HQ to, I would go to 4096, really make the computer bleed. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll press Alt V, go under Lookdev Plus, and here we are looking at the window. We press W, jump it over into HQ, press X, jump over to blur, and I just love going in and out with the blur on the background as I'm working. Just a nice way of just looking at the model. And then of course if you click, it will keep you in this look depth mode, allowing you to keep it looking and admiring your model. But you can also go back into this and right click in order to drop all that and go back into the solid view. So originally I was going to put a hotkey in there for this, but the left mouse right mouse system turned out to be quite handy for just quickly just staying inside of this setup and then going back into it, of course, to just drop it, which you can also just go back and forth here. But that is Lookdev Plus. So let's say that we're messing with a model. We have a piece selected that we want to look at, and we go under the Alt V menu and go under Lookdev Plus. But we want to change the material. Well, now you can press Control M in order to jump into Material Scroll and scroll through endless iterations of materials even while this is going on. Of course, I want to expand this in the future to be more accommodating to color and handle some of the other parameters that are associated with blank material. But you can see that I'm able to just scroll through and look for the right combination I want. And then of course, once I find something I like, I can press V to go back into viewport adjustment and just jump back and forth between modifying this object and just admiring where it's going. Of course, a little bit of chop there, but you get the idea. A common issue I'll see happen with users is they'll be working and they'll come across an angle that just breaks their smoothing. So to create that scenario, we'll just put a shape there like so. And if we go ahead and sharpen it, you can see that the sharpening did not work out here. In this case, I'm going to press F4 and bring up my preferences. And under the preferences and add-ons, there's now an option under the key map in the sharpen area to map Autosmooth to an area of Sharpen. In this case, I have it mapped to Shift. And what this means is that if I were to select this shape, press Q, and Shift click Sharpen, I can now go inside of Autosmooth and roll the wheel down until I get the right amount of smoothing that I want. I can also move the mouse around to get it just right. But this is going to be a major leap forward as far as the smoothing workflow goes when it comes to adjusting your Autosmooth. This goes a lot further, as I'll be showing later, but we still have Autosmooth located under the mesh tools. But in the event that you want to get to it even quicker, now you can just shift click it in order to just jump into Autosmooth. In fact, Autosmooth has been furthered quite a bit in this particular update, as I'll be showing later in this video. So previously I showed you how we attempted to make Autosmoothing more accessible and more dynamic. If we were to shift click and go inside of Autosmooth, we can move the mouse in order to just kind of search for where we need it. To take it a step further, you can press A and you will then add a bevel that then transitions you into the bevel modal. We can press Z and you'll see that you're basically beveling at the exact same angle that you were searching for on the Autosmooth. And this opens a realm of new possibilities for working with really angular work and just handing that off to other bevel modifiers. So Boolshift was intended to be our successor to the Rebool workflow. If I jump into Box Cutter, I can just do a quick cut, and I can do another quick cut, and I can do one more quick cut. In fact, I can just quick cut all day because it's the quickest cutter. So if I were to press Q and use Mod Scroll to scroll through my modifiers, let's say this cube was a mistake. Let's say we wanted this to be a slice. We could press Q and go under Shift Bool in order to quickly click and be done, and that is it. That's the purpose of this latest update, was to make Shift Bool faster. Here we go, shift it to a slash. We can of course scroll through all the different types of operations. Inset's always a good one. In fact, it's always nice to bring up the F9 to tweak inset after the fact, but now you can see that you can shift through bools and apply them faster than ever. So we'll select this bool shape using Mod Scroll and shift it to be a slice, click, and we're right where we need to be. In our previous release, a user reported that having region overlap off was causing an issue with the mirror interface items from being clickable. So I'm happy to report that that's been resolved. In fact, in order to show it in action, we'll do a cut, and we can go up here and change this to be new modifier if we want a new modifier. And we can turn region overlap back off and press Alt X in order to go under mirror, and we'll change this to modifier. And as you can see, I'm still able to click it in this latest update. In fact, if we were to press Control Alt Spacebar and go in full screen, whenever I press Alt X, you can see that there is no UI whatsoever. And for situations like this, I must remind users that there is also a D menu inside of Mirror that you can press that will give you options for all of the mirror panels up top. So you can actually use this at any time. This was something I forgot to mention, but it's very handy when it comes to using the mirror tool efficiently. Of course, mirror is located under Alt X, and that is it. Sometimes whenever you're working, it could be nice to have a weld modifier right where you need it. So I'll select this edge and perform a bevel, and then bring up box cutter, and we'll just use this dot as a jump off point, switch to red box, and just do a cut here. And so with this shape, we'll select the boundary loop by selecting and pressing Shift tilde to select a boundary loop. Maybe dissolve that edge. And if you go under to mark, we'll read the tooltip first. The tooltip says that just clicking it will mark and unmark an edge, but control clicking it will bevel an edge, and shift clicking it will add a weld to the V group. So the utility of mark has been expanded even more. So by shift clicking it, we can quickly add a weld and just move the mouse in order to see the weld in action. If we look at this in object mode, it doesn't look like a whole lot has changed. But if we go under add modifier and we adjust weld, you can see that weld is now showing the wireframe when it's being brought up. So now we can actually see exactly what results we're getting, and then from there Csharpen to get us the result that we want. Of course, this isn't the result we want, so we will shift click sharpen in order to roll the Autosmooth down to a more appropriate value, and this is actually the desired result. If we did not go through the weld merger pass, we would be looking at shading more than likely something like this. So weld definitely comes in handy for these nitpicky shading areas that just require a little bit of extra finesse in order to get right. So for that reason, weld support has been added to edit mode. Weld support has been added to mark. And also V group support has been added to weld for users who are wanting to use it on the fly. The Control tilde hardops helper has always been considered a mainstay of hardops, and I've always considered the operator options to be kind of the basement. So over the course of this last release, I've kind of taken efforts to kind of clean this up to ensure that if you're one of these users who wants to quickly set his bevel profile to be 0.5 or change the orientation of how he handles his modals, you can just do that here, in addition to being able to change your circle divisions. There's also been a degree of cleanup in the prefs as well. We're attempting to kind of clean these up to look a little better. So there's also been some cleanup in the properties area as well. Decimate is one of the modifiers we use to kind of simplify geometry according to angles. The easiest way to show it would be to press Alt V and turn on wireframes under the viewport menu, and then press Control 3 to add 3 levels of subdivision. We can't really see anything, so I'll press Control tilde, and under the subdivision modifier, we'll turn off optimal display and change it to simple. We may also raise the viewport up to something like 5. And if we go under modifier, add modifier, and we use decimate, you can see that decimate just cleans it up as if it were a simple plane. I'll press Control Z, and if we hover over decimate, you can see that there's a tooltip where holding shift will put an unsubdivision, which will result in us putting an unsubdivide modifier on it. It's set up right now to unsubdivided by 1, resulting in a geometry being rotated, but this perfectly sets you up for something like grabbing your plane and of course putting a wireframe on it to turn it into a great pattern. Csharpen is a bit of a classic. If we were to press Q and look at the very first option, which is sharpen, It is a consolidation of all of our shading workflow, and we can see that control clicking it activates C#. We will control click it, and you will see now that the remaining modifier information has been expanded to let you know what modifiers remain, as well as giving you just a little bit more information on what happens during the C# operation. For users of an international nature, in the latest version of hardops, under the key map area, there will now be a Tilde Remap area. I do not recommend removing any of the key map items under any circumstances, or else you will more than likely have to nuke your prefs. But for users of an international nature, you are now able to remap your Tilde, which will help with the micro help, mini help, and expanded UI situations. We do plan on expanding on it further as needed. But for the other things that use Tilde that are not in the key mapping, we now have a Tilde remapper for those operations. If you're trying to do something like the mirror curve stretch, of course you want to remap that in the remapper here. Same with the control Tilde hops helper, you would want to remap that here, because remapping the Tilde won't carry over to something. We're not going to remap the remapper. These are to just remap things that we may have overridden into code that users just don't have the ability to remap at this time. So whenever you're using hardops by default, you're in something called the angle workflow, which means you're playing basically game of angles. So in this update, we have raised the stakes. So, it's a different game now. It's Arnold's game now. So if we go under bevel and you're not under adaptive, when you hold Alt and scroll to will, you're able to lower the angle dynamically on the fly. So we can see how that is the difference between actually catching this angle that we need and not actually catching it. So I've been working this way lately and find it to be pretty lethargic. So I will control click bevel to add a new bevel. You can see at the bottom it says a 60-degree bevel was added. Since I can't see this bevel beveling anything, I'll just press X to drop it at half of what the previous bevel was. And I will use box cutter in this case to just draw a little box. And we'll give it some depth and then rotate it a bit. And so now you can see that this cut that was supposed to be caught by the second bevel isn't actually being caught. We can see that certain areas of it are being caught, and that's because 60 just isn't enough. So if we hold Alt and we roll back just a little bit, you can see that I now was able to catch the top part, and if I scroll it a little bit more, we're now able to catch the bottom at a smooth 38, just really catching that number just right. And from here, in order to fix the shading, I can Alt-click Sharpen in order to add a weighted normal. And we could just duplicate this and move it over and just kind of play around with this idea. But I've been cutting so many boxes lately using this, and I feel bad not actually having this out in front of the users to be able to play with, because it's just a fun way to work. And once you get your angles locked in, you can get in and start having some real fun with these shapes while keeping everything non-destructive. Of course, I can still select this and shift click in order to take the mod scroll through modifier scroll and actually see in action what I'm creating here. And you can see on the mod list on the left what modifier I'm on at this point in time, while we just scroll through and look at the work that we have done just so shortly by being able to control our angles on the fly. So the big theme of this release is being able to control angles and get that shading exactly the way that you want. So in combination with the Autosmooth modal, you can really lock it in and get that shading just right. And with alt scrolling, bevel can be suited perfectly for your needs, angles permitting. When it comes to bevel, I'm a big fan of moving the mouse in and out in order to bring it down. This is a very particular way of working I've become used to over time. However, coming from other packages, you may find it more normal in order to work in a right-handed system. And for that reason, in the Control Tilde helper, there's now an option to set your modal handedness to be right, so that whenever you go inside a modal, you can actually move your mouse to the right in order to make it bigger, move your mouse to the left in order to shrink it down. This is something that the moment I tried it, I was quite taken aback and found the need to completely reverse this. Of course, this means that while you're in bevel, you are now able to adjust your bevel and rotate your view at the same time and position your camera and all sorts of things that seem to be rather unnecessary inside of bevel. It doesn't look like we can jump into perspective yet, but this is the first steps towards us being able to unlock the view while you're affecting your modifiers on the fly. This behavior also extends to curve. So with this selection, we'll change it to a boundary, and I'll press Q and we'll use curve extract. And even during curve extract, I'm able to position the view around. So this is something that we'll be extending to more and more modals as time goes on. However, at this time, it is down to curve, bevel, and spin, I believe. So we'll go ahead and delete this and Shift A, add a plane. And with our plane, we'll delete half. Because of the way that this plane is oriented, I can tell you 9 times out of 10 it's going to show up red instead of blue. So let's go ahead and prove that theory. And it looks like I was proven wrong. But now during screw, you're able to move your view around, which is something that I've never found the need to do. But now you're able to do so. Of course, if I wanted to take the solenoid to the next level, I would select just this one point, control click mark in order to bevel that vert, roll it up the stack once, press 2 in order to vertex bevel, and then from there I'm able to bevel this at the right place in the modifier stack if I was trying to bevel just this point non-destructively in the scheme of things. This is something that, as I say it now, I see as something that we could improve upon and make easier in the future, so be right back on that one. So if we take this cube and bevel it, oh god, when you reverse the direction you're supposed to move for this, it is terrible. So I will press Control tilde and set this back to left-handed mode. And from here, whenever we add a bevel, it's exactly the way I remember it. And we'll control click bevel in order to add a new bevel, press X to drop that. And we'll just cut one of these pieces here and cut one more. And cut one more. Of course, all of these pieces look terrible, so we will need to select them all and click weighted normal. So from here, in the Alt M menu, blank material now has hotkeys. So if we select everything and we just control click blank material, you can see that everything's been given a unique material. But for single selections, now you can shift click and it will assign it as glass, a way to quickly get glass. If you are needing to make it emissive, we can go here and alt click and it will make it emissive. Of course, in the viewport we can't see emissive, but in render mode we sure can. When it comes to glass looking like it does right here with the Z fighting, I like to select the glass, go under modifier, click solidify and press 2 in order to push it both ways, and then I'll press R to just get rid of one side. And that is actually a better looking glass than what we were just looking at about 5 seconds ago. For some reason the Z fighting just gets to me when it comes to glass. And we'll lower the overall bevel on this shape and maybe mess with this one a little bit. And we can actually go in and control click blank material scroll in order to scroll infinitely through blank material iterations of the variants of the blank materials that would normally be generated until we find one that's something near what we like. But I just wanted to show that blank material has been enhanced for this version. Also, there were a few complaints about the F9 panel and some of the options, so currently they are removed until we finish examining what we can do to make them better. There's a new system that's supposed to be adding onto this down the road. However, until that time, it isn't quite up to our level of randomness that's expected with the blank material at this time. So this is something that we'll be revisiting in the future. Over the course of the next few releases, we aim to also improve our edit mode experience with hardops. For now, you can add a couple of modifiers. If we go under operations and add modifier, you can see bevel and weld here. However, these are options that are also under mark, which is now S mark in order to find it quicker on the keyboard. Normally, whenever you click this, you are just marking and unmarking. And this is in accordance with your sharp option. So if you have these unchecked or checked, it will not mark them whenever you mark it. However, if we look at the tooltip for longer than a moment, we can see that control clicking will allow us to add a bevel, which now we have a bevel. If we wanted to do that again, we could also control click bevel to add a bevel here. And then object mode, control click bevel to add a large bevel over the rest of this form, and then alt click sharpen in order to get the shading just right. If we were to take a shape similar to this and just select both of them, and under booleans perform a union in the Q menu, we can see that the shading breaks down a little bit. Normally I would just go ahead and apply it at this point. However, we could also try using the weld in object mode and hold shift and scroll it up the stack ahead of the bevel to make it an easier calculation. As we move the cursor, you can see that we're just searching a little bit further in order to solve this weld situation. So while this isn't the most adequate solve as far as geometry, the shading is definitely a little bit better than it was formerly. So this gets us a little bit further in our geometry endeavors when it comes to dealing with cylinders and curved surfaces. But I have been finding myself playing with Weld a little bit more often lately to just see what it has to offer in terms of general workflow in Blender. So I just wanted to end this video just kind of showing the utility of Weld itself, and also the mark menu in edit mode to maybe help you find some of your favorite options that you might think are either missing or too difficult to find. A lot of our tools are best explained through the tooltip. If the tooltip is inadequate in explaining where to go with something, then that's where, we need to begin working on our supplemental content. But our goal is to try to make the tool somewhat explanatory on its own. Usually whenever I'm working, I enjoy pressing 1, 2, and 3 in order to cycle through my layers. However, when I'm cycling through my layers, I'm tending to look at my object and look at my cutters and go to my main scene of presentation. I'm not trying to actually look at individual components of my scene. So whenever I press something like 1 and all my decals are gone, or all my kit ops inserts are gone, it's something that just irks me. So now in the latest version of hardops, there's a new option called Unify. So right now I have the collection active that I want to have everything on. And if we go under the Q menu and under settings, there's an option called Unify and Evict. Evict will actually get rid of the things that are on your scene and place them in the cutters collection that are considered irrelevant for rendering and presentation. But Unify will actually bring everything that's visible into the active collection. So if I press 1, you can see that now I'm able to look at my decals and kit ops inserts on the same mesh. And from here, I can actually deal with things in a unified fashion. So Unify is actually the key thing here. I plan on expanding this concept in the future. However, consider this a Lego for a foundational control and being able to manage your scene and what's being presented to you as a user. So I'm definitely grateful for this final feature to be added to this release, because it is the cherry on top. I was kind of working through scenarios on videos of situations I would run into, and one of the situations I foresaw coming in the future was definitely going to be getting all your decals and kit ops inserts on the same page for you to be able to group them or manage them. Of course, these tools have their own respective options for choosing where your assets get placed on their instantiation, but in the event that you're lazy and you're needing to deal with this right before the end, just know that there's now an option for you.